A very warm welcome, fellow adventurers. My name is Alan of SonicSowleGames. I'm a new game designer on the east coast of Norfolk, United Kingdom. I like to show you what I've been working on for quite some time and offer you a new experience of a retro style dungeon crawler. Back before the days of the plague, an idea came crashing into my mind, something I could not shake off and something I had to act upon. And for that, I like to thank Ash Barker for his wonderful and entertaining videos of Warhammer Quest. He has brought to life his heroes' personal adventures across a vast table of tiles. During lockdown, he indeed kept me and my game ideas alive and burning bright. I miss those days of games like these, of exploring on the largest table you could find. And so far, it is the return of HeroQuest and Mantic's Dungeon Saga that has called to me. And so Adventure Awaits was born. Adventure Awaits is a fresh new spin on dungeon crawling. 1 to 4 players, 1 to 4 heroes, this card and dice game brings to life those Warhammer-like experiences, minus the miniatures and even tiles. And so creating a new type of game, an SPG, a story-playing game, if you will. Played solo or with friends, you create your own stories and entertain your adventurers. As the Oracle, you unravel their daring exploits with cards and dice, as your own imagination creates new experiences time and time again. Using this imagination engine and turning over the cards, you go on a journey like flicking the pages of those wonderful fighting fantasy game books and using the Tower of Adventure board. This video is my first showing you the workings of my mind and passion to create my first complete game experience. In this first video, I will show you how you explore a dungeon in your adventures. In later videos, together, we'll go into detail of what you can see before you. Here in front of us is the Towers of Adventure board. As we saw at the beginning, it opens like a book, and the reason for this is our adventures will be a tale to tell, and it is done with cards and with dice. There is more dice which you use for combat and other types of encounters. Those special dice I showed trigger these 4 decks of cards, which we call omen cards. So once you have an adventure ready to go, you create the dungeon location, which is around 23 cards. You have 4 decks of omen cards. They are 10 cards each. These black cards here trigger fights, which go into more detailed combat using a range of polyhedral dice. The red cards represent dangers. These can affect your health, and these encounters could be things like traps or wandering monsters. Over here in the blue, we have our rewards. This can be found money, clues, and a mixture of things that can reward the party. And finally, the green deck. Here we have your general encounters, which will test your endurance as you go further into the dungeon, and also test your light source, because the last thing you want to do is run out of light. Over here we have something called the heroic actions. When you do combat and you roll a very high enough number, you also trigger one of those cards. There's 20 in a deck, and half of that is to do with melee combat and the other half is to do with ranged. That's half on one card, half on the other card. So there is 20 cards detailing 20 types of melee special attack and 20 ranged attack, and these add more flavour to your adventures. So what actually happens in a game of dungeon exploring in Adventure Awaits? Well, right now I will go into more detail later on, but let me just turn a few cards over and give you a feeling of what's going on, because at the moment you can just see this lovely art created by a great artist in Germany. I will mention his name in a later video as we explore more of the game. Now, as you know, going into a dungeon means an entrance, and there needs to be a reason for a dungeon, and of course your final encounter, which is your final goal, that big battle at the end of the movie and in your favourite TV series. So let me give you a quick rundown without going into the real specifics of the game to see if I can pique your interest. As you know, the adventurers will turn up at the entrance, as hopefully we can see here. So the entrance will always start your adventure, unless of course for some reason you're stuck in a dungeon and you're trying to get out. But normally we tend to go in to fight monsters and get rewards. So as we go into our dungeon, we start to explore the various things that are happening. I will go into detail later on about these cards themselves, but the thing you'll notice on this card is danger, a red cube. Well, the red cube is a red die, and what will happen is you would roll that and you would trigger several effects. This is a flaming torch, which is something to do with the party line, and you will see what happens there in a later video. But on this red die, it is connected to this red card. Some of these sides have the word danger, and one of those sides will have the opposite, which is reward, which is the blue. So if we did roll danger, we would turn over the red card. And here we have itsy bitsy spider. You're looking ahead, but are you looking up? It says that the leader must roll a perception test but use a token. And if you fail, you're going to end up fighting a giant spider. That would take us away from the exploration turn and into combat. Once combat is done, we go back into the exploration turn. So let's continue with a few more cards. After the encounter with the spider, we find a tight space ahead. We must squeeze through, and of course there is danger. So again, you would roll the danger die. And it is a torch, which means there is no danger, and the party line has an effect. It's like a token. You pass it down the party line like a pass the parcel. And some of these cards can affect the leader of the party, and sometimes someone else, and then sometimes it will affect the person who's holding this first player token. So it's like a pass the bomb type of thing, and hopefully the symbol doesn't turn up. So let's just continue. And here we find a passageway. Let me show you. There we go. We have a passageway. And it is a green cube. So again, we would roll a green die. Let's see if I can roll that on camera. And it is an event. And the event is, on the wall, a torch is missing. Take a torch item. And let's just go through a few more cards. The Chamber of Power. A strange flickering green light seems to pulse from the very walls themselves. Your head starts to ache. Your teeth start to hum. We can see here a reward and an event. And therefore, it is these two dice that we roll. Let me find a piece of space. We have an event and an award. So we would say to ourselves, which would you like first? And I would say, let's go for the juicy stuff. So we have, bending down, you move your fingers through the dirt. You see footprints in the direction you are heading. Gain a clue. Now a clue can be used later on to re-roll those omen dice. And then lastly, we have the event. A portcullis. With a mighty crash, you spin around and find the path behind you is blocked. If a location with the word flee is on it and it's behind you, then you are trapped and you cannot turn back. If you have the portcullis key, this does not apply. I wonder what game that comes from. And you get the gist. Now, if something was to happen and you end up with the guard's room, pushing hard, the door swings inwards. It's the guard room. It is here where the protectors of the dungeon rest and equip themselves for battle. Roll threat and reward. Let's grab the black die. Let's have one more roll. This is good. There is no reward, shame, and no threat. If there was a reward, excuse my hands, we can turn a card over. We probably want this before the bad thing happens. And in the guard room, there is a dying dwarf. It looks like before he dies, he hands me the portcullis key. Sounds familiar. Luckily, that portcullis that closed just behind us has now been nullified. And let's just pretend we did roll a threat. So we turn over the threat card and it says Batfest. The air is filled with bats. So it looks like we're about to fight some bats. So what would happen is you would grab a card. Let me show you one of these special cards. In camera, there we go. And here's a stat card for our bats, telling you how they act and with what dice. On the back of this card, you'll find some story and some special rules. In a later video, I'll explain more about these later, but this would be what we'll be fighting. So what would be happening now is we found the guard room, we kicked open the door. Before us, the dying dwarf hands us the key, and then suddenly bats come flooding into the room, which now trigger a fight. And then the game moves on. When you have a fight and your skill is high enough and you end up actually hitting an opponent, then you would turn over one of these cards. Oh look, it's a headbutt. You gain a bravery 1 token, and it says here if your target physical is no higher than a d8, it becomes stunned. So what that means is a smaller target, you will headbutt it, but this wouldn't work against the troll and definitely the dragon. Below, if you triggered this by a ranged weapon, you increased your damage die by 1. Don't worry everybody, this will be explained to you in another video. And let's have a quick peek at the next card. A deep thrust. Your target's physical die is lowered by 1, which means when you're rolling for damage, you have a higher chance of killing. What happens if you had a ranged weapon? Well, you've hit the weak spot. The target loses its defense, and if killed, take a perception 1 token, meaning congratulations, your eyesight and perception has allowed you to gain a bit of a bonus for that attack. So, hopefully that's a little bit of an understanding of what's going on in a general dungeon experience. All of this is customizable. You can swap out any of these cards for various traps and various magical items, treasure chests, quicksand, types of monsters. There will be a couple of different types of decks to represent different locations. More about that at a later date. So let's just move away from the board a second. I leave this in front of you right now. And just let you know that Adventure Waits is not only a dungeon crawler, because afterwards your heroes will travel using a travel deck of cards to a settlement. At these villages, towns and cities, you can recover, re-equip and seek out new quests. Each of these locations offer unique and exciting places to visit, from the simple taverns and blacksmiths to palaces. These will also be in an adventure book of tables and include many other quests. Many are only ever found in each type of these locations. If your party hangs around villages, quests will be more on dealing with raiding parties and the dangers of local monsters. If in a town, then you'd be offered more rewards, but the dangers would be greater as you hear of bigger threats to the townsfolk and the surrounding lands. And of the cities, you ask? Threats to the empire, great evils working against the region. Maybe even a king may need your services, for who else may rescue his daughter from a vile leader of a snake cult? All this and more in Adventure Awaits. I hope you join me in the upcoming videos, where we can chat more on my Facebook page. Together, I hope we can bring this experience to life and onto your table soon. I wish you well, brave adventurers.